What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, July 10th, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and another interesting weekend of whatever it is they're going to cook up for us this interesting weekend. What can I tell you? It does seem like the further along we go, the crazier things are getting. We had a caller who called into the show yesterday and said, it just feels like it's all falling apart. And I tend to be in agreement. It does feel like it's just all coming apart at the seams here. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. So let's get on into it. The Jeffrey Epstein case, of course, is continuing to get a lot of coverage. And it's rather interesting, especially when you consider how little coverage it got back when he was dealing with his plea bargain back in 2008. But Alex Acosta had to have a press conference early today where he was out there trying to justify the plea bargain they did back then. Now, he didn't mention anything about intelligence connections on TV, but he basically just tried to say it just really wasn't enough, and, you know, it was all he said, she said, and, you know, they're just girls anyway, and stuff along that kind of line. One of the people questioning him, though, asked a question which I think is very much on point. How do we trust you to do an honest, efficient job as Secretary of Labor when you obviously just cut this trafficker, this sweetheart deal? And that very much is on point with what's going on here. So it is coming on out here. So basically, we've got a lot of people pointing fingers and a lot of people trying to do damage control. And what's really important to remember is that all the pilot logs from Epstein's Lolita Express aircraft, 727, which supposedly even has a bed installed, those pilot logs were entered as part of the legal record back during the first prosecution. So they're preserved. Those are not going away. They can't be shredded. And they're basically laying out the story of who was going down to the island and how many times. It's already completely undermined Bill Clinton's statement that was issued yesterday that it was only on the plane 4 times and never down to the island. That's completely destroyed right now. And so I'm sure that Bill Clinton probably was out there thinking that, you know, he's retired, he's a former president, and he could, you know, just sort of enjoy his retirement without having to worry about any more legal troubles. Well, wrong. It's come back to haunt him. And so the eyes of the entire world are back on him now, as well as on Hillary. And if there's one thing that's going to come out of all of this brouhaha about Jeffrey Epstein, it's going to make it difficult, if not impossible, for Hillary Clinton to step into the 2020 race, which, of course, I'm overjoyed at. And I'll be honest, it's personal. The Clintons destroyed my career and my life back in 1994, and I'd like a little payback. So that's going to happen now, I think. Now, we had a caller into the show yesterday. Actually, we had a couple of callers saying, nothing's going to happen. It's going to go away. Justice is not going to be done. Well, maybe, maybe not, because back in 2008, everybody wanted the story to go away. That's not the case now. Obviously, the Republicans want this story to come on out, again, to fend off a possible Hillary campaign next year. They wanted to come out just to damage Democrats in general. painting with a broad brush here. But here's where it's really getting interesting, because one of the names that's in Jeffrey Epstein's little black book is Ehud Barak, who is running against Benjamin Netanyahu in September's elections. And Netanyahu is desperate to hang on to power. So right now you've got Israel, Netanyahu, and the Mossad. They want the story to come on out. And so basically it's a war between those who want to cover this up and those who see their own political fortunes to be enhanced by the story coming on out, the scandal just exploding all over the corporate media and the world. And that may be one of the reasons why it is in fact getting so much media coverage, in the corporate media right now. So, all right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. So it's not entirely a given that this story is not going to go anywhere. It's getting a lot of traction in the corporate media. That should call attention to itself. Bill Still, over at the Still Report, is out there asking if Epstein has turned on the Clintons. Because maybe he was counting on them to take care of them. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they had a falling out. And if Epstein really is looking at some serious jail time from this prosecution in New York, he might start turning on people. Of course, that may make him a dead man walking. But I'm sure that a man as smart as Epstein probably has several dead mans, which is already set up. Now, as we mentioned yesterday, Alex Acosta apparently, during his interviews with the Trump transition team, when he was being vetted as a potential Secretary of Labor, he was asked about this sweetheart plea deal with Epstein, and he told them that he was told Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. That's a direct quote. Not exactly saying who, but basically saying that Epstein was an intelligence operative, part of CIA, Mossad, some other group. And if that turns out to be true, and it does make a lot of sense given that sweetheart plea agreement, then basically Epstein was running the largest political elite honeypot operation ever run in the United States of America, to gather information on various high-profile individuals. So this Jeffrey Epstein rabbit hole is going a lot deeper than anybody really says. All right, we're still seeing fallout from Conchita Sarnoff's reporting. She appeared on Fox News Monday, basically saying the pilot's log confirms that underage girls were aboard Jeffrey Epstein's plane at the same time that Bill Clinton traveled on it. So this is getting very, very sticky. And if Hillary was thinking about running in 2020, I imagine those ashtrays are flying now up at the Clinton home. Hillary is notorious for throwing things at Bill. It was more than a few times that Bill Clinton showed up in public with a black eye. I mean, they put makeup over it to try and hide it, but they couldn't really. But Bill Clinton is trying to distance himself from Epstein, but his name is all over the Lolita Express flight logs. Can't get away from that. Those are hard records here. Now, Ann Coulter has come on out and basically said that the Epstein operation obviously existed for blackmailing purposes, and that he likely had a state sponsor and has a magnificent grasp of the obvious here. But Ann Coulter was on 790K ABC on Monday and said that she believes Epstein was running a blackmailing operation. And yeah, it would make sense whether it was for a state sponsor or just for his own financial, political aggrandizement. And here's the question I have. How could anybody, whether it was Bill Clinton or Prince Andrew or anybody, go down to that waterfront mansion in Florida or down to that fantasy island in the Caribbean or out to the ranch in New Mexico or the place in Paris or the ski chalet or any of those places with these underage girls and not expect there were going to be cameras and microphones all over the place? What is wrong with these people that they went along with that? Are they that much a slave to their lusts for underage flesh that they just didn't care? So Coulter basically in her interview said Epstein, according to accounts from the girls, said he wanted them to have sex with these powerful men, come back to him and report on it, describe what they wanted, what their fetishes were. And Coulter is confirming he had cameras throughout the house. So yeah, it was a honey trap. A big one. Biggest in U.S. history. And Coulter said prosecutors should be investigating how Jeffrey Epstein got his money and became a billionaire because his official story is simply not believable. Alrighty, over at Vanity Fair, they have an article saying that apparently Donald Trump knew that Jeffrey Epstein had incriminating photos of Bill Clinton. This was back in 2015. On stage at the annual CPAC conference, Trump said something very interesting about Bill Clinton. Nice guy, he said. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with that famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems. Now, Trump obviously knew what he was talking about. Vanity Fair was reporting that shortly before CPAC, Trump was approached by David Pecker, who then owned the National Enquirer. Pecker visited Trump and brought along an issue with a Prince Andrew and Epstein-related cover, and they were joined by Trump lawyer Michael Cohen. After the meeting, Trump called in Sam Nunberg, who then worked for him. And Nunberg, in an interview in Vanity Fair, said, Michael was sitting in there when I came in, and the issue of the National Enquirer with the pictures of Prince Andrew was on his desk. Now, remember, the pictures of Prince Andrew involved him snuggling up to an underage young lady. I mean, they're both clothed, they're both standing up, they're posing for the picture, but Andrew's being very, very friendly, shall we say. And Trump said that Pecker had told him the pictures of Clinton that Epstein had from his island were far, far worse. So Trump knows what's going on here. Okay, one of the issues we're looking at up there in New York, the U.S. District Court judge presiding over the current Jeffrey Epstein child trafficking case was appointed to the federal bench by former President Bill Clinton. And he should recuse himself. This is Richard Berman, was appointed by Bill Clinton in 1998. He presided over Dinesh D'Souza's case, where D'Souza was convicted of reimbursing friends to evade campaign contribution limits in a New York election. And as we mentioned before, disgraced former FBI directors James Comey's daughter Maureen is one of the prosecutors in the case. So they're already trying to basically set this up to find some way to make it all go away. But there are a lot of people who don't want this to go away, and it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a street brawl over whether this news gets out there or not. Social media is continuing to stealth edit references to Jeffrey Epstein to try and remove ties to Democrats and try and manufacture ties to Donald Trump. And basically, their Wikipedia has tried to remove all mention of Democrats who have flown on the Lolita Express, which was obviously Epstein's private Boeing 727. The problem is, of course, that the little black book is out there. The pilot records, the pilot logs are out there. Anybody who wants to hunt it on down, they can get the information. Anybody who's relying on social media or Wikipedia to find out what's going on, they're idiots at this point. They're fools. They're morons. They're being led down the primrose path. If you want the truth, you got to work for it. You got to hunt it down for yourself. Anytime you sit on back and you let somebody like Google or Facebook or YouTube tell you what to think, you're going to think what they want you to think. They're not going to give you the truth. They're in the business of lying and distorting the truth just as much as ABC, NBC, Fox, CNN, PBS, all the rest of those. They have been compromised. Totally, totally compromised. And behind all of this, whether it is the current situation with Epstein, the situation with Epstein back in 2007, the Franklin scandal, whatever, it's starting to reveal that America's power elite really do have this sickness of sexual predation, this heart of darkness, where they feel this is acceptable behavior. To just go on out and grab these little girls, and in some cases little boys, and just have sex with them. And it reminds me of a South Park episode called Red Hot Catholic Love. And that episode dealt specifically with the pedophilia scandal within the Catholic Church. But obviously, it's something that seems to infect anybody with a tremendous amount of wealth and power, that they feel this is acceptable behavior. And I don't know about you, I think it's a little sick myself. And they feel they can get away with it, they're not going to get prosecuted. The only time they get nervous about it is when the public finds out, when the voters find out, when the taxpayers find out. And that's what's going on right now. So as I said before, this story may break into the wild. It may break out because there are very powerful people who want the story to go public. The Republicans want it to go public. Netanyahu wants it to go public because he wants to destroy Ehud Barak. They may not be able to keep the lid on this one. At the very best, they may try and cover up Epstein's links to an intelligence agency, probably the CIA. I mean, the CIA is not above this kind of kinky stuff. They ran a bondage parlor out in San Francisco for 9 years as part of MK Ultra. They think this stuff is kind of fun. As far as Epstein himself is concerned, as I said, if he does not have some dead man switches already set up, then he himself is a dead man. He knows too much. Too many people are afraid of him. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, more about our domestic political news and then the war zones and so forth. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. And we are going to be back after these few words from our sponsors, so stay tuned, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones right now to Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Don't you find it kind of strange that the Democrats attack President Trump in about everything, except one thing, Mike, his ties to organized crime, because he was a real estate developer in New York City. And the mafia, they run rampant in that city. And he had to be mob connected. But you don't hear that much in the news, especially from the Democrats. I mean, why not?
Well, probably because the Democrats are just as tied on with organized crime as anybody else. You know, what's that old saying? People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
Yeah, I know. Like, you know, who's ever without sin cast the first stone. I understand that, but I mean, it's obvious he had to be connected. Come on, from New York City, a developer. I don't understand, Mike. Anyway, thanks a lot. Anyway, bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. I mean, at this particular point, I would say that pretty much everybody in government is likely, probable, connected one way or the other to organized crime. They operate like organized crime. They sell us they order us to buy vaccines, which are ineffective and harmful. It does seem like organized crime has in fact succeeded in taking over the government, a process which began during Prohibition here. Okay, so getting on back here to our local politics. When Donald Trump was elected president, there was a lawsuit filed claiming President Trump violated the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution because foreign government officials were staying at Donald Trump's hotels. And it was a bit of a reach. The guy runs hotels, and he runs very nice hotels. Now, I've never been to a Trump hotel myself, but I understand that they're very, very nice. There's one here in Honolulu. But apparently the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals has basically thrown the lawsuit out, saying that no, in point of fact, these foreign officials staying at Trump's hotels are not a violation of the Emoluments Clause. And it was a great deal of nonsense to begin with here. Okay, there is a phenomenon that's going on right now, and I think it's illustrated by this story here. NBC, trying to go after Mitch McConnell, basically went to Ancestry.com and dug up the fact that Mitch McConnell's great-great-grandfather owned slaves. Oh my goodness, his great-great-grandfather, who he probably never even met in his life, owned slaves. And, I mean, come on. What's that got to do with Mitch McConnell? And it's not just Mitch McConnell. They're doing it to a whole bunch of other politicians who are not on board the reparations movement to say, oh, well, they're opposed to reparations because their ancestors owned slaves. I am not responsible for anything my ancestors did. I refuse to accept the guilt for it or to take credit for it. Now, in my case, my ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad. I'm very proud of the fact that they did that, but I can't take credit for it. I can't say that I had anything to do with it. I wasn't alive back then. But to see the corporate media sink to this level, where they go on out and they dig into the past and they say, oh, this person, their great-great-grandfather owned slaves, therefore they're a bad person. It's got nothing to do with them. It's absolute pathetic propaganda. And I understand that that's something that we have come to expect from our corporate media. Find a way to smear people. Oh, they come from a family of slave owners. Yeah, okay, fine. Do they themselves own slaves? Have they ever owned slaves? No? Then what does the fact that their great-great-grandfather owned slaves have to do with the price of tea in China? It's absolutely shameful behavior by the corporate media to engage in this kind of gratuitous smearing. But I mean, that's where we've come to right now. If you're opposed to reparations, oh, it's because your family came from slave owners. I don't care what my family did before I was born. I am not responsible. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Political situation here. Apparently, Dabney Friedrich, who's a Trump-appointed federal judge, has rebuked Robert Mueller and the Department of Justice for falsely suggesting that the Internet Research Agency and Concord Management and Company were linked to the Russian government. This is part of that whole Russiagate. Oh, Russia's behind everything. Russia's doing all these bad, evil things. So, Mueller's court claimed that the Russian government interfered with the 2016 election in a sweeping and systemic fashion revolves around the claim that there was a Russian bot farm linked to the Kremlin, which was a claim Mueller was never able to prove. And defense lawyers for Concord Management filed a motion in April demanding the judge hold Robert Mueller and U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr in criminal contempt for releasing the redacted special counsel report, which contained allegations against Concord Management and Company that were not in the original indictment. It was a smear job here. All right, turning to the international news, things are heating up around Iran. The United States is seeking allies to outsource the hunt for Iranian oil tankers. And the latest out of Washington is they want to put together a coalition that would ensure freedom of navigation both in the Strait of Hormuz and Bab al-Mandeb. And these are, of course, the waterways connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden, respectively. And the U.S. is out there saying they're in contact with a number of countries to see which ones have the political will to support the project. This is coming from Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford. The way they're phrasing that, it's sounding to me like they're getting a lukewarm response. Anyway, to get a legitimate policing project, they need UN approval, which they'll probably get, and not require some kind of coalition of the willing that the U.S. used to illegally invade Iraq in 2003. And Iran itself is welcoming an international effort to maintain freedom of navigation, which tells us Iran isn't really doing anything they should not be doing. Meanwhile, Rouhani is mocking the United States for calling for an emergency meeting of the International Atomic Energy the International Atomic Energy Agency meeting, which was called for today, to basically scream about Iran's violation of the Iran nuclear deal. And Rouhani is saying it's a sad irony when you consider the United States left the deal. And that's a point that needs to be made over and over and over again. The United States quit the P5+1 deal. They don't have anything to say about it anymore. They don't have any legitimate grounds for questioning what Iran does now that the United States basically broke that deal. And the United States is behaving, as China says, like an international bully by coming on out here and saying, well, yes, we left the deal, we left the P5+1, but you, Iran, must continue to live within its limits. No, they don't have to. Iran can do what it wants now. The United States quit the deal. They arm-twisted Europe into basically violating the deal. It's absurd. And I'm not surprised that that British ambassador was sending those cables back to London saying that the White House is basically dysfunctional. By the way, that ambassador did lose his job over that. Netanyahu, meanwhile, remember, yesterday we were talking about this member of the Knesset who came on out and said Netanyahu is trying to fan up tensions with Iran because he thinks it's going to help him win the elections in September. So Netanyahu is now threatening Iran with Israeli planes that can reach everywhere in the Middle East. And apparently he came on out and did this little video presentation saying that Israel warplanes can strike anywhere in the Middle East, including Iran and Syria. And he did it posing in front of an F-35 fighter jet at Nevatim Air Base in central Israel. And of course, Israel is the first nation to actually use the F-35 in a combat situation, if you could call it that. It's kind of a loose definition. They basically used it as a standoff launcher. So Israel has used the F-35 to attack Damascus and Homs, attacks that left multiple civilians dead. And they keep saying, no, we're only killing Iranians. We're only killing Iranians. But Netanyahu is talking tough, trying to goad Iran into doing something that would justify an escalation of the hostilities here. Where things may really get rather tense, though, has to do with the seizure of this Iranian tanker in the Straits of Gibraltar. And the top commander, the Iranian Armed Forces Major General Mohammad Hossein Bagheri, is saying that the seizure of the oil tanker was a retaliation against the downing of the U.S. spy drone by the Iranian Republic Guard Corps, and saying that saying that Tehran could engage in a reciprocal move, meaning they can start seizing ships. And so General Bagheri said the move will not remain unanswered, and if necessary, a response to this abject act will come on agenda at an appropriate time. So they're getting really kind of tense over there. Now, because of that, apparently, a British tanker has now been given a military escort going through the Strait of Hormuz. And it was accompanied by a British military vessel during its passage. The British oil tanker was the Pacific Voyager. So now they're talking military escorts, which of course is going to drive up the price of oil. It's amazing here. Over in Somalia last April, in fact on April Fool's Day, the U.S. military carried out an airstrike near El Buur, a town in central Somalia, and the official story by the U.S. government is the attack killed 5 terrorists and destroyed 1 vehicle. Now, the reality is the terrorists included a civilian woman and a child. And apparently a Pentagon document leaked on out is showing that the Pentagon knew who they hit and who they killed after the attack. They came on out and they basically lied to you, like they always do. Yes, we've killed a bunch of terrorists here, and it's a small child, but it's a small terrorist. Okay. The United Arab Emirates has made a decision to withdraw the bulk of its forces from Yemen, and the pullback suggests that the UAE is preparing for the possibility of a U.S. military confrontation with Iran, in which the UAE and Saudi Arabia could emerge as prime battlegrounds. And it also reflects a difference in the approach of Saudi Arabia and the UAE towards Yemen. Now, the UAE is concerned for its international standing and mounting criticism of the civilian toll of the war in Yemen, as well as a recognition that the Trump administration's unquestioning support may not be enough to shield its allies from significant reputational damage. See, that's the weapon that we all have. Public condemnation. That's what the UAE is afraid of. It's what Saudi Arabia is afraid of. It's what Israel's afraid of. They're standing in the world. So for all those people who call into the show and say, you know, there's nothing we can do. Yeah, there is. You can make noise. You can get on out there and you can talk to your friends and neighbors and say, this is wrong. They're killing civilians. They're killing non-combatants. They're dropping bombs on countries that have not attacked us. That's the main weapon that we have. The court of public opinion here. Over in Ukraine, the United States is upgrading several of the naval bases to allow NATO and American warships the ability to dock just miles from Crimea, and centered at the Ochakiv Naval Base and the military facility at Mykolaiv. The American-funded effort includes reinforcing and upgrading existing piers and adding a new floating dock, security fencing around the bases, ship repair facilities, and a pair of brand new maritime operations centers from which Ukrainian and NATO forces can direct exercises and coordinate activities. Now, supposedly, this is in response to that little upset they had in the Kerch Strait not too long ago, where Ukraine basically sent 3 vessels through the Kerch Strait without obtaining Russia's permission, and Russia seized the vessels and the crews, which they are still holding. Now, personally, if I were Russia, I would think seriously about releasing the crews. Keep the ships. They would clear violation, but you can defuse the situation a lot by sending the crews back home. All right, story coming out of Zero Hedge, and this is saying something I've been saying for quite some time. The Taliban have effectively won in Afghanistan. You'll never hear that in the American corporate media. Nobody's going to admit that we actually lost in Afghanistan, because that pulls the wheels off the war wagon for the rest of the campaign to conquer all the resource-rich areas of the planet and shackle them to the U.S. dollar. But we already know the United States is in negotiations to pull out of Afghanistan, chief of which is not to have to admit that they got their clocks cleaned. Sort of reminds me of this wonderful scene from The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, where the Europeans and the Turks are at war with each other, and the Sultan and the European representative are talking, and the European representative is saying, well, it's time to discuss when you're going to surrender. And the Sultan says, surrender? We're winning. And the British representative says, oh, come on, you're being picky now. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I heard you earlier talking about Epstein and all these rich and powerful people and their affinity for young boys and young women. And you made it as it seems to most people as it's just a sexual thing. Whereas I think there's more going on here. I mean, I think there's actually a satanic angle to this, a ritual abuse angle to this. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein had a temple built on his island. Who knows what was going on there, who they were worshiping, what kind of demented acts were taking place. It's kind of like the Catholic priest. A lot of people say, oh, they're a bunch of homosexual pedophiles, Catholic priests. And I said, well, some of them might be homosexual, but a lot of them might be Satanists. And Satanists believe they get a certain kind of power from having sex with and violating the innocence of children. I mean, this goes to Aleister Crowley. It goes way back to Moloch and, the people way back, before even the Old Testament times. So I think that the angle of Satanism, and it's really in your face, because you can go Google pictures of the temple on this island, Epstein's Lolita Island, and it's kind of creepy looking, and you wonder, why does this guy, billionaire who's hobnobbing with Prince Andrew and President Clinton, why does he have a temple built there, you know? And from what I hear, he spent like millions and millions of dollars after he was arrested, and it became known that women were being abused there, that he spent millions and millions of dollars pouring concrete in the underground and destroying that temple. So, well, you know, I think we're getting a bit of the story, but when the real story comes out, as Q says, these people won't be able to be seen in public. And as you say, I think that there's a big angle with the Mossad here. I think that Trump has been hip on this, you know, since he had Epstein thrown out of the country club there in Mar-a-Lago. And, you know, I was listening to this guy talking about Trump, and, you know, Trump's had his own security, you know, detail for, you know, 20 years or more. And, you know, a lot of these guys are ex-New York cops and ex-Miami cops. They're all clued into what's going on. You know, they know how these rich, powerful billionaires get away with all this stuff. And I'm sure Trump gets the inside scoop on all this, and has been for years and years. So he's probably got some dossiers and files on these people himself. And with his intelligence and memory, you know, I don't know. I think this could be like one of the big shots against his adversaries. And I think the Israelis, as you were saying earlier, there's a civil war going on there too, and they're taking sides. And Netanyahu is siding with Trump, and so it's very interesting on many levels. But as far as I'm concerned, these satanic child abusers, the day the vengeance comes for them, whether they're Democrat, Republican, whether they're Israeli right or Israeli left, or Prince Andrew, can't come soon enough. I just can't wait for the day that they're chased down the streets with pitchforks, and the fate awaits them that they so richly deserve.
Well, I would agree with you, but I'm looking at pictures of the temple, which, by the way, has been torn down since all of this stuff happened. Anyway, listen, Joe, stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials. I'm going to put you on hold. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Joe in Tennessee, and we're talking about Jeff Epstein and his little private island here. I'm looking at that temple in Google Earth. It's still visible, even though apparently it has since been torn down following an earthquake. And I'm not sure I agree with the idea that this is satanic, given that he is on this remote island. It may be his place. I mean, he was devoutly Jewish, and it may just be a little personal chapel for practicing the Jewish faith. We don't really know one way or the other. But in terms of the thrill, if you will, of abusing little tiny children, it may be just getting away with it. It's an expression of power that you have over these people. And I'm not really sure what the pathology is. But there clearly is a pathology there.
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, I think that there is a satanic angle to this. I mean, the satanic ritual abuse is kind of something that happens. It's part of a lot of their rituals. I mean, if you go back to Aleister Crowley, he wrote books about the way to get power through sex magic, and in particular, you get more through the acts with children and things like that. But, you know, you had a previous caller, and he talked about Trump and his mob connections. And I just wanted to say something about Trump. And of course, he has knowledge of and probably met and maybe has connections with the mob. He was a developer in New York. But, I mean, that's part of the greatness of having a man like Trump as president, and that it's just like Epstein. He knows about Epstein. He knows all the dirt on these people. He's been around when Studio 54 was going on. I mean, the developer in New York, I mean, he knows about the Wall Street, and the Wall Street, who was good, who was corrupt, who was bad. I mean, he's been in with the police and Giuliani and, down in Florida. Trump's been where the action's been for the last 40 years. I mean, so if you talk about a resource in a man as president, if he does want to clear out corruption, I mean, he knows who he had to bribe when he was building things. He knows who, the mob guys were. He knows who that like little boys and little girls. It's common knowledge in these elite circles, and Trump was in there mingling with them. So I'd love, to see him potentially go renegade and double cross these people would be the best gift he could give this country. And I'm hoping this is the start. And I think the smart way that this is being played is that Trump's letting them all talk about Acosta and him, and that's the story. Because I didn't hear one question today about Bill Clinton at the Acosta's conference.
Yeah,
and they're going to let the sharks go after Trump in some way, and then when the evidence and the videos start coming out about Clinton, it's going to be just like the Mueller investigation. It's going to be a big boomerang, and it's going to catch them all. So this is the way Trump seems to play these things. He lets them run out on a limb, and then he saws it off. And I'm hoping a lot of these guys go to prison. Let's just hope that happens. I just hope it happens.
Well, I don't think it's going to happen. Epstein, if he is connected to intelligence, he's another untouchable like the Clintons or Clay Shaw. But I think, again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, our most potent weapon against the political corruption that we're seeing is public opinion. And so it's important for us all to talk this story up. Anyway, Joe, thanks for the phone call. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, yesterday we were talking about the fact that Germany has rejected the United States' request to provide ground troops for Syria. And today we're finding out that both Great Britain and France have agreed with Washington, D.C. To send more troops into Syria. And this despite the awkward issue over these leaked cables from Britain's ambassador to the United States, which described Trump as inept, insecure, and incompetent, which I can't find a reason to disagree with any of that. But so more troops are going to go into Syria to kill those gosh darn Syrians, because after all, they didn't really do anything, did they? It's kind of the big problem. They didn't really do anything to the United States. All right, the European Union is now mulling sanctions on Turkey after a second drilling ship has been deployed in Cypriot waters. Everybody is arguing over oil drilling rights in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it looks like there's a showdown coming between Turkey and Europe over Turkey, their plans for oil and gas exploration and drilling in waters recognized as belonging to Cyprus. And the EU is now mulling cutting financial assistance to Turkey over the illegal drilling. So EU envoys are meeting today to discuss punitive measures against Turkey, including suspending aviation talks, possibly even sanctions. I've got this really kind of wacko, crazy, out there idea. We have all these countries waging war over each other over oil. Instead of spending all that money to wage war, let's invest that money in finally coming up with a new energy source that's going to be clean, cheap, available to everybody, and then we can all go back to living our lives, driving our cars, running our factories, running our stores, running our homes, without having to sacrifice our children for it. Nah, what a silly idea I'm having. All right, the British Army has rejected calls. I love this one. The British Army has rejected calls for mandatory mental health screening for serving soldiers. I guess it's okay if they're going crazy out there. Regular screening was recommended by a coroner following an inquest into the deaths of 2 infantrymen found hanged in the same Northern Ireland barracks. But in a leaked letter, General Sir Nick Carter, head of the armed forces, said screening was potentially harmful. Anyway, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, the British ambassador to the U.S. has now resigned over the leaked cables revealing that he called Trump incompetent and inept and insecure. And as we mentioned yesterday, the cover story is, well, it's those gosh darn Russians. They leaked those cables to the Daily Mail. They wanted to sabotage British-U.S. relations. It's those evil Russians again. Sure it is. You know what's really frustrating about all this Russia bashing? On my bucket list, and Claire's too, we wanted to, if possible, visit Russia. We wanted to go to the Hermitage. I wanted to see the recreated Amber Room. Never going to happen now. All right, let's go to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I sure hope Joe don't eat his words, because you said last time there was indictments were coming, Joe. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. This basically, I mean, this whole Satanism look like, I'm not buying that. Even though he has crazy statues, Michael Jackson had a lot of crazy crap too.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean anything. This is all about power over people. That's what it's about. And they're kicks. So they go to his island, and guess what, folks? This guy was intelligence, because his madam was that Maxwell woman whose father owned the Daily News, right?
Yep.
And he also was a Mossad agent. And his other daughter, isn't she like an Israeli propagandist or something?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's all in the family.
Yep.
So this was a gathering of information, intelligence, using blackmail and stuff, because you would lure these people there thinking they're going to have a party and sleep with 20-year-olds getting drunk, and then only to find out they got a manila envelope sitting on their desk in the morning showing 14-year-old girls with braces. That's it. You know?
Yep.
And I'm just not buying this whole Satan angle. You know, not to say there ain't no Satanists, you know, but you know, this is different. You know, like and this is shutting down this intelligence operation. Maybe Epstein will move on, but I don't think anything's going to happen. I really don't, because look at all the people who are involved and going to prosecute. You know, Cuomo's daughter, and Bob Barr's overseeing. He's not recruit. And you know, like that Acosta Trump's got in there. How do we know he wasn't to like his island on the Lolita Express? You know, supposedly Rudy Giuliani was on the Lolita Express.
Yes.
You know, who else? I mean, you know, we don't know who and who's not all on a, you know, and that's only to the island. We don't know anything other than that. I mean, obviously there's a lot more. And Mike, you know, when I was reading that a lot of the places they use to front these young girls coming in are like motel chains and truck stops that they use to like bring these girls in, and or you know, do their thing with getting them. And so this is like this is beyond just a ring. You know, this is like a professional thing going around the world, because you know, like Prince Andrew. I mean, and that's all we know of from Britain. Who else? Maybe from France, Germany. I mean, you know. So I definitely don't buy the Satanist.
No,
angle.
Me neither. Me neither.
But I don't think Trump's going to do anything about it.
For one thing, if you look at the roots of Judaism, they don't believe in Satan.
And the whole thing is, Mike, these people only believe in one thing: money, power.
Yes.
You know, that's more important to them than any worship of anything. You know, and I don't believe Trump. I mean, Trump is owned by Sheldon Adelson and Carl Icahn. Look what he did for Bibi in Israel. You know, so I don't think he's going to do anything about this. But like I said, like Acosta, why is he still in the Trump administration? Like, why is he keeping him still? That don't make sense, does it?
Yeah, that's an important question right now. Acosta has become a severe liability for the Trump administration, and yet Trump continues to defend him.
You know, unless there's more than what we know about what's going on with Trump, you know, I don't know. Nobody knows. You know, like I said, I don't know Trump personally. We only know him from being on the TV. You know, I'm not with Trump 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last, whatever. I'm 48, so you know what I mean. So we don't know the guy. Everybody got to stop saying, oh, Trump's going to do this. We don't know anything about Trump, really.
No.
You know? And, Mike, I want to say a shout-out to Lenny. Was it Lenny from California?
Yeah.
But he hasn't called in a while, and it's great to hear from Lenny. And if he calls back in, I'm just curious what you think and he thinks before I get off the phone about that Georgian radio host who was talking about Putin's dead mother and father. That's insane. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah, he brought up his ripping on Putin's mom and dad. And there's all these protests going on in Georgia now against the radio station. So they gave the guy a couple weeks leave, probably with pay, you know, but that's the kind of mentality these people have. You know, it's like, and he's not a Satanist, it's just they're scumbags. You know, that's it, you know. But that's all I'm going to leave you with, Mike. Have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. We're going to go back to the phones to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'll stay with the same theme, and great information you got going. Dustin and the rest of the callers always have a lot of good things to say. I kind of go along with the rest of that. I'm confused, though, with Trump's association with the whole Zionist Jewish movement, how he could get, it seems like he's playing both sides. I don't know if you just saw this, just came out in Zero Hedge where Ben Garrison, the cartoonist that's been very favorable to Trump, he just got disinvited to the White House. And there you go. You can't criticize, all he was pointing out is to the control the Rothschilds have. That's not a secret. That's a fact. Yet, because he said that, he's anti-Semitic, and he's now disinvited. I mean, it's so blatant into your face. To me, I think the whole thing with the Epstein thing was where he got his money, the whole Maxwell thing or whatever name was his pimp.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing gets back to the Mossad. I think they had the money. That's how they control Congress with that operation and many others. They got a lot of. Like Dustin said, they got a lot of manila envelopes, and it's just so obvious. I mean, here's this guy. He's totally Trump supporter, Ben Garrison. He says, and all of a sudden he's now disinvited to the White House. What a slap in the face to Trump's base, huh?
Yep.
It just makes you sick. I think something's going to happen here, and I'm not anti-Jewish. I'm anti, Zionist, you might say, or I'm for America. And just like you've always made people aware that this country's been taken over. And I don't know. Maybe this is a fulcrum. Kind of scary, which way it's going to go. They got so much power.
Yeah.
But I think Epstein has a dead man switch. How would you go through all that if you don't? They do something to him and stuff's going to pour out. Make Julian Assange look like nothing. Don't you think?
Well, if
I know
if Epstein is an intelligence asset and it's looking more and more like he was, then he's smart enough to know that he's got to have a dead man switch.
This is you got to get buy a lot of popcorn for this one. I think it's got to. I don't know how they get away. There's too many. They cross the Me Too movement, and these people don't know what to do. You know, I don't know. It's just it's bizarre. Anyways, I don't know. Well, how do you think it's going to end?
I'm not really sure. It's entirely possible that Epstein is going to meet with an untimely end. It all depends if people can find his dead man switches. That's where Vince Foster made his mistake. His dead man switch was in his White House office safe, and that they were able to get at it and destroy it.
Yeah, that was no offense for Vince Foster. Good guy, I guess, in a lot of ways, but that was not a dumb man.
That was dumb.
There, you know?
Yeah, that was dumb.
So, boy, it's a one big circle jerk, Mike, and I don't know. I hope to keep the internet open so we can communicate. But thank you very much, and I'll continue to watch the show.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again here. Turning on over to Israel, there's been another one of these classic cases. We keep seeing this. This is Middle East.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open.
Okay. We have some feedback there. All right. Apparently, Israeli police this morning forced a Palestinian family out of their house in the Silwan neighborhood of occupied East Jerusalem and handed the home over to settlers. And basically, Silwan-based Wad Hilwa Information Center posted the video showing occupation forces and settlers storming the house and assaulting the family members to seize their home. And the center reported that the family refused to comply with the eviction order, and at least one family member was detained. And apparently this family had been battling a right-wing Israeli settlement group for 25 years to remain in their family home. And the Elad Association is notorious in its efforts to encourage Jewish settlement in Silwan, located just outside the old city and Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Elad also confiscated money raised to help the Silwan family fight their eviction order. They'd had a GoFundMe page set up to carry their legal costs, and that money got confiscated here. Meanwhile, an Israeli court has overturned the conviction of a Jewish settler who was filmed stoning Palestinian cars in Hebron, basically smashing the windshields with large rocks. And apparently the probation officer went before the court saying the accused, quote, takes responsibility for committing the crime, end quote. And his conviction was overturned on his claim that supposedly Palestinians had thrown rocks at him. Not the Palestinians who owned the cars who were damaged, but just Palestinians in general. All righty. Israel has now launched a new program for students traveling abroad. If you're an Israeli student and you're going to university in another country, you must first go through this mandatory indoctrination course where you will be basically trained to be an ambassador to combat BDS, to argue against claims of apartheid, and basically propagandize in favor of Israel. Another little story here. Apparently there was this Palestinian gentleman who was falsely accused, wrongly accused, of raping a 7-year-old Israeli girl. Now, he's been cleared of the crime. It's been cleared of the crime, but illegal Israeli settlers are still calling for his death and spraying graffiti on the walls of his village, vandalizing cars. Apparently, rape is such a serious crime that even innocence cannot be a defense. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson, who's likely to be Britain's next prime minister, is out there whitewashing Britain's crimes in Palestine. And he's described the 1917 Balfour Declaration as bizarre, tragicomically incoherent, and an exquisite masterpiece of Foreign Office fudgerama. And Johnson appears to understand the absurdity of how Arthur James Balfour, Britain's foreign secretary during the First World War, supported establishing a Jewish national home in Palestine while pretending that this would not harm the indigenous Palestinians, which obviously was not the case here. Meanwhile, Israeli Education Minister Rafi Peretz is out there screaming that intermarriage among diaspora Jews, particularly in North America, is a second Holocaust. So if you are Jewish living here in the United States of America and you marry a non-Jew, it's like a second Holocaust. Now, the way the rules work, and I learned this because of my first marriage, if a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman, that is a major tragedy. They start ripping their clothes and crying. But if a Jewish woman marries a non-Jewish man, it's considered cool because they're bringing him into the religion. But apparently, according to this guy, any intermarriage is now verboten. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, over in France, to their credit, okay, they have rejected this idea that online speech criticizing the government of Israel represents anti-Semitism. Good for the French people. Because no, criticism of the actions of the government of Israel is not anti-Semitism, any more than criticizing the actions of the Nazis represents hatred of the German people. It was an absurd idea that Israel's trying to push all over the world, and France has basically said no. So good for them. Over in Germany, Angela Merkel has been caught on video one more time, visibly shaking. This time as she welcomes the Prime Minister of Finland. Now, I'm not a big fan of Angela Merkel, especially with her globalist open border ideas. I don't like to see anybody who's ill. And maybe it's because at my AGE and starting to deal with a lot of this stuff myself, I have empathy for people who are trying to live their lives and overcome these kind of issues. I don't know what's wrong with Angela Merkel. But in terms of her medical situation, I have a great deal of sympathy for her. And I hope whatever it is something that is treatable and she can get back to being the little whatever it is she is. But this is 3 times now, I think. And so something is definitely wrong. All righty. Great Britain has a brand new aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, and they spent a lot of money building it. It's supposed to be the future flagship of the British Navy, and it was out on sea trials and apparently was leaking so bad, sea trials had to be called off and it had to return to port for repairs. And so 3.1 billion British pounds, and it's leaking. Okay. Russia is now pitching a massive arms deal to India. As you know, there's this kerfuffle going on between the United States and Turkey over the missile deal there. Russia is now offering an array of cutting-edge arms to be produced locally by India. This is the deal. They're going to offset. In other words, they're going to come on down, and India is going to get the blueprints and the plans and technical assistance and build these new weapons themselves, including an advanced killer submarine and a 5th-generation fighter jet, along with other weapons as well. And the United States is now talking about a trade war with India. How dare you buy weapons from Russia? What's wrong with our weapons? Well, they're expensive. They don't always work. Turning to the economy now, over at Deutsche Bank, it turns out that before this major restructuring, Deutsche Bank had moved about 2,000 jobs from Wall Street to Florida. In other words, they went to their workers in Wall Street and they said, we're going to pay to move you down to Florida. The rents are lower there. You're going to have a higher standard of living. Everything's going to be a lot better. And now all those people down in Florida are terrified they're going to get caught in the next round of layoffs. And, you know, it's one thing if you're on Wall Street and you get a pink slip, there's always another Wall Street job. Down in Florida, not so much. Not so much. Over in China, they're losing control of their debt load, just like the United States is. They're getting defaults, missed payments, and I think one illustration is this lady, Zhu Xiaoguang, dubbed the Jewelry Queen, and she was being heralded as the success story because she started selling trinkets on city streets and eventually wound up in China's parliament. She became Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, and now her company is in bankruptcy. But China has relied on borrowing to fuel its expansion for at least a generation, not unlike the United States of America. In 2018, China was known for creating 4 billionaires every single week. It's number one globally in self-made fortunes, but this quick pace of growth also masked strategic mistakes. So this overexpansion into crowded sectors, misinvestments, misallocations, coming back to bite them. And of course, the trade war is not helping at all, one tiny bit. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. We'll be right back after these few words. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news here. And we were talking about China's debt piling up, and they're hardly the only one. Right now here in the United States of America, our deficit is now 25% higher since the 2016 election. And that's bad news. The government is spending the money faster than we can pay it. Or they're spending it faster than the Federal Reserve can print it up, which is where it's all coming from anyway. But it's not wise fiscal management. And as I said before, the United States is repeating the strategic mistake of the Soviet Union. They're bankrupting themselves with military spending. And I imagine part of it was they thought, well, we'll spend all this money to build all these new weapons, then we'll sell all these weapons to other countries, we'll make the money back. Except that is not happening. Bad strategic mistake here. All righty, interesting little story here. There is this container ship. In fact, it's the world's second largest container ship, the MSC Guyane, and it's just been seized by the U.S. government. It was caught carrying 1.3 billion with a B dollars worth of cocaine, and it was seized at a Philadelphia port after having stopped in Colombia, Chile, Peru, Panama, and the Bahamas. Now that is a lot of cocaine. You remember the movie The Usual Suspects? You know, in that movie it was like $91 million worth of cocaine. Ooh, 1.3 billion dollars. That's 18,000 kilos that were being brought in at one time. Here's the embarrassing part. The ship is owned by J.P. Morgan. And it's operated by Switzerland-based Mediterranean shipping company, MSC. So I don't know, is J.P. Morgan going the same route that DeLorean did? because that's what brought him down. Couldn't pay all of his bills, and he got set up for a sting. Turning over to the immigration citizenship situation, Nancy Pelosi is out there flapping her gums again, saying that the census citizenship question is about trying to make America white again. Well, America, was, since the days of the Pilgrims, pretty much white. And it's rather interesting to see all of these social justice warriors who talk about cultural appropriation, and respecting other people's cultures, and yet they seem to just so hate white people. And it's part of their identity politics to just hate all things white. But Pelosi is forgetting that 14th Amendment, which says very clearly, the purpose of the census is to count the number of citizens to draw the congressional boundaries. Citizens, not people, not illegal immigrants, not migrants, citizens, legal citizens. And for most of the history of the census, there has been a citizenship question. Obama took it out. Nobody made a big stink about that. They should have. But it's a further illustration. The Democrats are counting on the illegal immigrant vote to seize power and to hang on to it. A little bit of an embarrassment over there in Buckingham Palace. Apparently an intruder broke in at 2 o'clock in the morning. In fact, just early today. And basically got within just a few meters of Her Majesty sleeping. And 4 minutes later, he was apprehended by the police. It was a 22-year-old man. And apparently he just climbed over the front gates of Buckingham Palace. That's a trick. I've been to Buckingham Palace. Those are some formidable gates. Now, he wasn't carrying any weapons. They're saying it wasn't terrorism. It was just a guy engaged in a little bit of nonsense, I guess. It's a good reason. Okay, the gun grabbers are out there. They want to ban bump stocks. They want to ban convertible rifles. And one of their favorite targets to ban are sound suppressors. We have to ban sound suppressors because, that will help bring down the homicide rates. Well, as it turns out, studies are showing, this is out of Government Slaves, studies are showing that most criminals don't use sound suppressors. In fact, very few do. And that, in fact, banning a sound suppressor will have no effect on homicide rates whatsoever. Now, before I start getting all kinds of nasty phone calls about, oh, you want sound suppressors, you're in favor of crazy people with guns. Sound suppressors very often are combined with flash suppressors and what are called hold-down suppressors, where some of the exhaust gases from the propellant blow upward to counter the recoil, to keep the barrel down. And at one point when I was very young, I had a weapon that had such a suppressor, and it worked very, very well. And by the way, sound suppressors, a lot of people have a mistaken idea about what they do because they've been watching way too many movies and TV shows. James Bond, where somebody will put out a gun with this little 2-inch piece of additional pipe on the front, and they pull the trigger and it goes, and the bad guy falls down dead. Doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. All a sound suppressor does is break up a single shock wave into multiple shock waves, which makes it difficult to determine where the shot came from. That's it. You still hear the gunshot. It still makes a lot of noise. It's going to wake up the neighbors and the dogs. So, now there was this amazing video, and we linked it to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. And it's this Delta flight. And it's a video shot out the window, just ahead of the engine. And what it shows is a little bit scary. It basically shows the rotor cap, that little conical part ahead of the fan blades, literally has broken off, and it's rattling around the inside of the nacelle while the engine is running. And there's this very red hot glowing glow on the axle. Now, maybe that glow is normal and it's supposed to be there. I don't know. But apparently the Delta airline had an emergency landing. It went very smoothly. Nobody got hurt. But I watched that video, and the first thing I was thinking of is, can Claire and I row to Indiana? That's a little unnerving, how many problems they're having with airlines these days. And no, I don't know the particular brand of aircraft that's going on there. All right, Allison Weir over at If Americans Knew is talking about online censorship, which is getting to be a major problem. Back in 2018, If Americans Knew made a 15-minute video exposing Israel's project to censor the internet, which YouTube removed. If Americans Knew reposted the video, YouTube restricted it. So it basically tells you that, yes, in point of fact, Israel has succeeded in figuring out ways to censor our internet. And I'm not happy about that at all. I don't want a foreign government deciding what we can and cannot see. I mean, if Israel wants to block the video from Israeli citizens, that's their business. But how dare Israel come into this country and start saying Americans are not allowed to see what Israel is doing? And how dare our politicians allow it to happen? Anyway, apparently there is a type of anesthetic machine used in the National Health System hospitals, can be hacked and controlled from afar if left accessible on a hospital computer network. And basically saying CyberMDX said a successful attacker would be able to change the amount of anesthetic delivered to a patient. And alarms designed to alert anesthesiologists to any danger could be silenced. I think this is a good example of why just because you've got computers doesn't mean it's necessarily a good idea to put everything on the network. This whole Internet of Things is shaping up to be a major, major problem for everybody, between constant monitoring of everything that you say, the problems that are showing up in some of these products, like the front door locks, which can be unlocked remotely. It's one of those things, it sounds like it's a good idea. Oh, you know, it's right out of science fiction. Everything's run by the computer. But the implementation is coming up short. Now, I've had a lot of fun with computers in my youth. I'm not as big a fan of them as I used to be, I'll be honest. But when I walk out of this room, it's almost a Luddite lifestyle. Just light switches on the wall. I don't need computers on everything. I don't need a computer in my coffee maker. I don't need computers in my shoes. I think it's definitely overkill. Alrighty, over at Vimeo, not to be outdone by YouTube, Vimeo is now purging all vaccine awareness channels. Any video that expresses any type of skepticism about the safety and effectiveness of vaccines is being purged. Our corporate social media is becoming Winston Smith. You're not allowed to see information that you need to guarantee your health or to protect your health. All you're allowed to see is information that will convince you to buy a product. They've been totally compromised. Alrighty, apparently over in Illinois, more people in Illinois are claiming religious objections to vaccines. And apparently that means for every child with a legitimate medical reason not to be vaccinated, there are more than 6 children with religious exemptions. Well, any way that you can get away from this, I think is a good thing. And I'm opposed to mandatory vaccination until we know for sure that these vaccines are safe and effective. And we don't know that. In fact, to the contrary, we know that many of these vaccines are very harmful. You should read the package inserts. You won't hear this stuff on the TV commercials. Your doctor, your healthcare provider won't tell you. Read that package insert. Take along a magnifying glass. It's in really tiny type. And it'll say, this vaccine can cause all of these negative possibilities. And it may or may not work. And as we reported yesterday, this year's flu vaccine does not work because a new strain has emerged in the wild this season. See, the way the flu vaccine is done, they literally take a guess 2 years ahead of time. What will be the major flu in this year? Well, we think maybe this flu will come back. And that's what they brew up the flu vaccine for. And it takes them a while to get it cultured and into the factories and into the stores. And so if something changes, if there's a new flu strain, it simply does not work. And there have been so many cases in recent years where the flu vaccine doesn't work for that very reason. They guessed wrong. They simply guessed wrong. But they go on selling it. They go on insisting that you take it. And I would think that if there is one inalienable right or unalienable right, Mr. Adams, it's control over what goes into our body. I don't want to be treated like I'm livestock at a factory farm where some guy comes along with a needle and just sticks me. I want to have some say over what's going into my body. When you hear about all these horror stories from Gardasil and these other chemicals, we, first of all, need to be fully informed, which we're not getting from social media. And then we have to have choice. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, over in the world of Android, and I'm glad that Claire and I got off the Android machines. Apparently, there is yet another malware out there. It's called Agent Smith, and it replaces legitimate apps with tainted copies. that are built to push advertisements or hijack valid ad events, which is basically stealing from the advertisers. And apparently around 25 million devices have already been infected with Agent Smith after users installed an app from an unofficial Android store. Now, I'm not saying that the official Android, or for that matter, the iTunes stores, are absolutely rock solid protected, because we know that they're not. But going to an unofficial source for apps, you're just asking for trouble. Now, when I got my very first iPhone, this is way back, I was working on Lost, I think, and I was curious about it. I had it jailbroken, and it just caused so many problems. I said to heck with it, and I did a clean reset on it, and that's what I've done with it since then, because the phone is supposed to be a phone. It's supposed to do email. It's supposed to do web browsing. I don't need it to do anything else, and I don't need to prowl around the file system, and I certainly don't need to have it wide open to apps that are, first of all, crashing the system. That was a big problem. And installing malware. Okay, Steve Wozniak, who was co-founder of Apple with Steve Jobs, has gone public saying it's time to delete your Facebook account now. And he's basically saying Facebook has become a massive spying operation, and unless you're out there just putting pictures of your younger relatives or pets or anything like that, it's rather useless. Certainly for those of us in the truth movement, Facebook has become useless. It's totally filtered. They're blocking conservatives. They're blocking vaccine criticism. They're blocking doubts about GMOs. And it's only going to get worse. They're going to start blocking debate on whether human-caused global warming is real. It really is 1984 and Winston Smith all over again here. So the Woz's warning, I think, is legitimate, to delete your Facebook account. And I know Facebook makes it very, very difficult, and they want to hang on to your data. But it's time to start looking at some alternatives. Now, a lot of people are very lazy, and they're staying with Facebook saying, well, I'm not a conservative, and I'm not concerned about vaccines, and I'm not concerned about GMOs. Why should I give up Facebook? Okay, there's the music. Time for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about health and safety and so forth. And by the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we could use a few phone calls. So I'm looking at this story, and it's from naturalblaze.com. And it's talking about how somebody did a study published in the journal Environmental Research looking at kale, which is supposed to be this wonderful, healthy food, and discovered that 60% of kale samples were contaminated with a cancer-causing pesticide. Gee, I wonder which one they might be talking about. And that's another reality we have to deal with in this country. We have a government which turns a blind eye on corporations selling dangerous, hazardous products. As long as it's making money and the corporations are sharing that money with the government, they're perfectly okay with that. They think it's just fine. If you get sick, well, that's good for the medical industrial complex. Okay, now, over at Facebook, Laura Loomer is suing Facebook for $3 billion after being banned. And it was part of this purge that Facebook went through earlier this year, where they banned users including Alex Jones, Louis Farrakhan, Paul Joseph Watson, and of course Laura Loomer. And Facebook is claiming that they violated company policies against dangerous individuals and organizations. And Laura Loomer is saying that labeling her as a dangerous individual represents a slander, a defamation. And so she and Larry Klayman have filed this monster lawsuit against Facebook. And frankly, I hope they win. I hope they win, because it's time for these corporate media tech giants to understand that they are, in fact, a public forum. Remember, we were talking yesterday about how the courts had ruled that Donald Trump could not ban posters to his Twitter channel because it's a public forum. And apparently there's already a lawsuit being brought against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over that same issue, that she bans people from her Twitter feed. Well, sauce for the goose. They're all public forums. You can't just say, this one's a public forum and you can't ban people, but it's okay for Facebook and these others to do it. It doesn't work. Somebody needs to put a lawsuit together on that one. Meanwhile, Facebook has changed their rules as to what is acceptable behavior to allow calls for violence against anybody defined as a dangerous individual, such as Paul Joseph Watson, Alex Jones, Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos, Louis Farrakhan, and others. They're now considered fair game. Facebook has declared a fatwa on them. Don't say violent things about the people we like, but these others, sure, go ahead. We don't care. We don't. Okay. Now, not too long ago, somebody came on out with this browser add-on called Dissenter, which allowed users to add their own comments to any article anywhere on the internet. And it was done in response to the practice by some of corporate media to either shut down their comment sections entirely, which is happening more and more, or again, to block certain people from posting, or to delete certain comments that were not in accord with the editorial policy. Well, my goodness, this Dissenter add-on, it's people striving for freedom. We can't have that. And so apparently both Mozilla and Chrome have now banned this plugin, because it's an existential threat to the fake news, the wars, and the lies. We're in a battle right now over freedom of speech. And it's very clear, the government is not going to give us freedom of speech. Facebook is not going to give us freedom of speech. Google will not give us freedom of speech. We have to earn it for ourselves. We have to take it. We have to work out ways to share information with each other. And that's really what it comes on down to, sharing with each other what we know, what we have found out. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, the most potent weapon we have right now is the court of public opinion, where we go on out and amongst ourselves, amongst 300 million fellow Americans, and we say, look at what they're doing. Look what Epstein is doing. Look what the Clintons have done. Look at all the lies we were told about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We have to make noise, because if we're talking with each other, Facebook can't shut that down. Google can't shut that down. The government can't shut that down. So it's time to go back on SneakerNet and just go on out and talk to people. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Now, this is a very, very bizarre story And in light of other things that we have seen lately, it's not surprising. It's very indicative. Apparently, in Sacramento, California, you can be fined $500 for repairing your own car in your own driveway. And I mean, we're seeing people looking at jail time for the length of their grass, windmills on their front lawn, trying to grow food on their own land. And so now in Sacramento, it's illegal to repair a vehicle in your own garage. Now, this is, of course, once again, it's about getting you to spend money on professional mechanics, from which the government would get a piece of the action. You know, we get a piece of the action here. You know, you don't fix your own car. You take it to Joe the mechanic over there, and he fixes it, and we get a piece of the action here. But what you can be fined for fixing your own car in your own driveway, replacing brake parts, minor tune-ups, changing the oil and filter, repairing your own flat tires, lubrication, things like that. Stuff that when I was a kid, that was considered like, you know, that was normal. You didn't take your car to the garage for things like that. You did it yourself. Heck, when I was a kid, I did complete engine rebuilds at our home in West Covina. I did my engine. I did the engine on my brother's Fiat. I helped my mother restore from the ground up a 1952 MGTC. That was like normal. And now they're saying, no, you can't do that. You're breaking the law. You're absolutely breaking the law. And the way the law is written, it's just kind of bizarre. Apparently, there's a provision in there against using tools not normally found in a residence. I mean, I don't know what that means. I just don't know what that means at all. All righty, well, I'm running out of talking points here, so the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's just see what's going on here. Okay, it is the 10th year. We are a little less than a week away from the anniversary of the launch of Apollo 11. It was also my youngest brother's birthday. And we're seeing another story here. Apparently, Chuck Schumer has now gotten dragged into the Jeff Epstein story. Apparently, Epstein was a major donor to his campaign, which there's nothing really suggestive about that, but it's going to have a lot of people looking to see if maybe Schumer's name is in those pilot logs. Apparently, down in Mississippi, they have now banned swimming at all Gulf beaches. Apparently, there's a major blue-green algae bloom, which is proving to be very, very, very toxic. Okay, we've got a caller on the line. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. A little earlier, you were talking about these trillion-dollar deficits with the United States federal government.
Yeah.
It's the new norm. There's no way around it.
No, it's completely out of control.
Oh, yes. We're at the end stages
Yes.
of out of control, right? That's why it's like Ronald Reagan in 1980 had a 70, I think like an 80 or $90 billion deficit. And I think it was around 2.6% of GDP. And of course, you know, Paul Volcker, I think at the time, had already jacked up interest rates. So he was, you know, stifling growth, which was apparently out of control. debt growth. That is right.
Yeah.
Because of what Richard Nixon did, which was close the gold window.
Yes.
There's no convertibility at all. Yeah, I mean, it's like that. Now it was all up to the bankers. You see how that works?
Yes.
And he also did something with the healthcare. He changed it from being nonprofit.
You're talking about Richard Nixon. Yes, he signed the
Yes.
Health Maintenance Organization Act.
Yes, there's another one. He really did a lot of damage to your country.
Yes.
Like, I mean, and it's irreparable.
Well,
like you have stated.
in terms of HMOs, I would agree that's irreparable. But, we could go back on the gold standard, and there are a lot of people arguing right now that we need to do that, especially if we're going to maintain parity with countries like Russia and China, which are clearly moving to implement a gold standard.
Yeah, they're hoarding, as it were. But the problem with doing that is the bankers won't like it, because that automatically restricts what they are allowed to do.
Yes.
With their shenanigans. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to crash.
I agree.
It's painfully obvious that we hear about these things that are going on throughout the world. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein and what he's been doing. And, I mean, it's just the tip of the iceberg. These people, and I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say there's probably about 1 million of them. They're out of control.
Yes.
And now everybody can see it. It's the age of information. Everyone has a cell phone almost. I don't, but at any given time, Mike, you could be filmed. Right?
I'm sorry.
Any given time.
You could be what?
Filmed.
Yes.
In public. And it doesn't have to be, the cameras that are sitting, that are already there, like traffic cameras and whatnot, because it's going to get worse. But realistically speaking, if we are to believe that, like, Facebook is an intelligence gathering a thing, and of course it is. It's all data and whatnot. And all these apps, we're already there. Like you said, 1984, we are there. There's no doubt about it. We are full on in it. That poor guy is sitting off to the side reading a book. And the problem is we don't have that luxury anymore sometimes. This age of internet things. Everything's listening to us.
Yes.
So when you're buying a new TV, even though it won't be online, but it's hooked up to an HDMI cable, is it just audio and video?
Well, are you talking about coming in or going out? Because most TVs these days, in order to have the constant software updates, and that's a big problem we have with our Samsung. We'll be watching a TV show, and all of a sudden there's this little pop-up in the middle of the screen saying the Smart Hub has been updated. Do you want to run it now? And of course, no, I don't want to run it now. I'm watching a movie. All the newer TVs, they have cameras to watch you. They have microphones to listen to you. The stuff has become so incredibly inexpensive that it's just sort of a matter of course that it gets built into everything that's out there. And we don't know where all the microphones are. I mean, I know there's obviously one here in my iWatch and my iPhone and so forth, but we don't know where else any of them might be. Of course, at my age, it's not like I'm doing anything interesting anyway.
But it's still creepy knowing that it's out there.
Yes,
it's like somebody drilling a hole into your habitat, and their eyeballs right up against it, and they're watching you.
Yes,
it's crazy.
It absolutely is, and
would be comfortable.
you know, they're trying to condition the next generation to be comfortable with it, to be accepting of it, as if you will, and just say this is just the way that life is, and they may well succeed. And I think one of the things that our generation needs to do is to tell these kids about the need for privacy. And what's really interesting is when I was growing up, kids had an instinct for privacy. They didn't want their parents looking in on them. They wanted to have their private moments. And are they really willing to give that up?
It's manufactured consent.
It always is. It really always is.
You know, this indoctrination that's going on, because I heard you talking about it yesterday, and one of your talking points was, you know, they're teaching like gender stuff and, you know, like little kids about sex education and all that nonsense.
Yep.
You know, in Canada here, one of the premiers, he said, you know what, we're not doing that. We're going back to the way it used to be. And as a matter of fact, flashcards, they were good. Yeah. We're going to start teaching adding, subtracting, and multiplying. We're going to start teaching the English language, which means breaking it all down into everything that is preposition, verbs, adverbs, you know, adjectives, all that stuff. We're going back to that. And a lot of people
I remember
don't
when
like
I
that.
was in school, we had to memorize the multiplication tables. Of course, this was before the advent of calculators. But I think kids need to be taught basic math so that if they make a mistake on the calculator, they can look at it and say, whoa, that can't possibly be right. And I know that because years ago, I taught remedial math at a high school in Southern California for one semester. And they were all using these calculators, and they were all making these hideous mistakes because they had no intuitive sense of the math that was involved, and they would look at these obviously erroneous results and not know it.
Yeah. When I went to high school, we were on the right at the edge of the teacher was actually teaching the student how to use, you know, like the TI-35 Texas Instruments calculator.
Yeah.
In order, you know, we were getting away from the tables. You know.
Okay, well, Al, I'm going to have to let you go.
Thanks,
we got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, I just got an email from somebody. The other day, we had somebody call on in and say that Stephen Hawking was one of the people who was shown as flying to Jeffrey Epstein's little pleasure palace down there in the Caribbean. And we were all saying, well, Stephen Hawking, you know, what the heck's going on? Turns out it was not the Stephen Hawking who was the physicist. It was Stephen Hawking, who's an Olympic gold medal winning lightweight rower, say that 3 times fast, from Australia. So good thing we got that sorted out. All right, back to the phones. Ken in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, and aloha. I know somebody that has a pacemaker installed and had to get an MRI, and they had to have the technician come down from the company with a box. I think it runs on Wi-Fi. It's wireless.
Yeah.
And they had to be paired to reload the calibration data into it. Oh, my God. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a very scary situation. And again, I understand them, you know, wanting to have a wireless means of communicating with something like a pacemaker, but it should have much better security, and it should have much better robustness in terms of maintaining its calibration data. It seems to me like they rush these things out, and they're fragile. They're very, very fragile, but they rush them out there and saying, this is the latest thing. It's a pacemaker, and it's on Wi-Fi, and it does all this wonderful stuff. And especially with all the cybercrime and hacking that's going on here, you know, it would make sense, you know, at least give each of these pacemakers a unique identifying number that is known only to the doctor and the patient and the technician, so that somebody sitting outside the house can't pair with it and go on in and turn their heart off.
Well, you could be having a situation where you can just swamp it out. That may have been the case with, I think Ron Paul's wife has a pacemaker. It'd be very easy. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people, get threatened or they start to think about these things.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. I mean, or somebody wants to collect their inheritance a little early.
You have time for a second subject?
Sure.
It has to do with your repairing your car in the yard. I'm pretty sure, because I've mentioned this in the past, and I've heard it from several sources, there are Supreme Court cases that put the municipalities in their place, and I think it has something to do with most houses have a fence on the side and in the back. You're not allowed to look over a fence, give somebody a violation or some kind of a ticket unless you have a real warrant. Now, I know municipalities, like some say that they have administrative warrants, but they're not real. We had a situation here years ago where they were trying to fly planes overhead to look down at people's pools and then start hitting them find reasons to hit them with violations. That all stopped.
What were they finding these citizens for? Like too much algae or something?
Yeah. No, I think it would be something like observing as to whether the pool was constructed properly, whether it had a fence around it, that sort of thing. I mean, if your house is surrounded by a fence from the middle to the back, that should be sufficient. But you know how politicians are. If a kid climbs into a pool and drowns, and they want you to have alarms and cameras on them, and so that stopped. It went on for a short period of time, and the only reason when certain things stopped, somebody must have got sued.
Yeah, generally, I think that's what happens is they'll go on out and they'll make a bunch of money, and then there's a counter lawsuit saying, hey, it's not my fault. The parents lost control of their kid. And generally there's a countersuit, and the courts will sort it all out.
But I think that generally speaking, the municipalities are allowed to have some control over the front of your house. So I guess unless you had a portable lift in your driveway, I guess that would qualify as a tool not normally found at a residence. But if you had it in your backyard, I don't see how they could. I mean, obviously, if you don't fight something or you don't know you're right, then you're going to be bamboozled into plea bargaining or something like that, in which case you're just signing your rights away.
Well, part of the problem, of course, is that municipalities are constantly changing the laws. We have to deal with that out here in Hawaii, where it's like every 6 months is a whole new set of laws that we have to be paying attention to in terms of, how we organize our home or everything. And again, the idea is revenue generation. We're hitting you with a fine for XYZ. I didn't know XYZ was a problem. Well, we just passed this law a few weeks ago, and you're in violation, and now you got to give us money. Anyway, listen, Ken, we're going to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to James in Tokyo. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Nice to hear your voice again for the second day in a row. I kind of have a heroin addiction to your voice, by the way.
Thank you,
anyway,
I think.
Anyway, are you gonna be moving to Idaho? Don't
Indiana.
tell me that you're gonna be moving to Idaho. Indiana. Don't tell me that you're gonna be moving to Indiana before November.
I'm afraid the move is going to be happening right around the 1st of September.
I asked you not to tell me that.
All right. Well, I won't tell you that then.
Anyway, I want to talk about Trump a little bit.
Okay.
I heard from Dustin in Jersey. He's like, I don't know Trump, but he's like maybe a warmonger and this and that. and sometimes you talk about it. I haven't really heard anything from Trump that conduces to that theory. I mean, like when he talks about Iran on the TV, he's like, I don't want to go to war with them. I want to make a deal. I don't want to go to war with these people. I want to make a deal. With Afghanistan, he's like, I'm taking people out. You know, I got to get a few people in for intelligence, but yeah, I just want to take people out. He seems like a very peaceful president to me in my lifetime compared to every other president that I have known.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, every president talks peace and then they wage war. I remember back in 2008 when Obama was campaigning on a promise of ending the wars and bringing our kids back home. And he always used to say, you can take that to the bank, which may explain why the economy is in such a shambles right now. But, you know, again, what Trump says is rather meaningless. What Trump does is what's important.
I think what he does is he has taken people back. Number one, number two, when you get to the Iran thing, you have Iran politicians coming out how they're saying that America gave them like a lot of slush fund money for all these European companies to enter their economy, and I think that says a lot. Number one, so that I think he's just trying to clean the swamp. Remember, you know, about that. And, you know, like, about Donald Trump, like, where Dustin from New Jersey is like, yeah, I don't know Donald Trump. Hey, I don't know him either. But I know his best friend. And, like a guy I've known for maybe 28, 29 years, like another billionaire in Palm Beach. And I've only talked to him only one time about Donald. He's like, oh, you know, James, you think I'm a really nice guy? I was like, hey, man, like, I just saw, like you, him, and his wife and whatever are doing this big charity event. Wow, you're good friends with this guy? This is before he was president. And he's like, yeah, he's a really good friend. You think I'm a real good mensch? I mean, this guy is, like, even a nicer guy than me, but, he's a tough guy. And I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It's like sometimes you just got to... I think you have to like tell a guy of how he is, like of what he does, and he's taking people out. He's just stopping a lot of bad deals. He's doing tariffs, and the tariffs accommodate lower taxes. I just think it's like the greatest president in my lifetime, and I'm only about 5 years younger than you.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to agree to disagree because I don't think Trump is a very good president at all. I think in fact, I find myself in agreement with the former British ambassador. He's inept, he's insecure, and we're, almost 2 years, well, more than 2 years into his first term, and I haven't seen much of the swamp being drained at all. In fact, I find it very alarming that he is continuing to stand by Alex Acosta with this whole Jeffrey Epstein plea bargain. And so I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. Now, I don't think... I'm sorry, Michael. Yeah, I don't think the Acosta thing is going to last too long. But personally, in my life, I've seen a lot of stuff change. I've seen changes in regulations. I've seen changes with the global warming. I've seen him being the only freaking guy that's trying to build a wall and do something against immigration. But especially in my own personal life, the deregulations have really helped me be able to retire in my own life because a lot of companies I invested in have gone from rock bottom to enable me to even retire, and I personally benefited, just from this guy. Well, good that it worked out for you, but I know there's a lot of Americans right now who are not doing very well under the Trump administration, and they're not going to be as fortunate as you are relative to retirement. And I don't think we should judge a president by what they do for one or two individuals, especially their cronies, but what they're doing for the country as a whole. And looking at the country as a whole right now, again, I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. Doesn't mean I support all of those liberal Democrats who are out there screaming impeachment and Russiagate and the rest of it, because I'm a firm believer in, the process and the restoration of the republic. But as for Trump himself, I'm going to find it very hard for me to whip up enthusiasm for supporting him next year.
All right, so my final question, very quickly, is so if not Trump, who has done everything that he's done so far and everything that he says he's going to do in the future, I mean, who the heck would you support more than him?
Well, at the moment, I haven't seen anybody really emerge right now, although Tulsi Gabbard is looking very attractive.
Okay, yeah, she's against a lot of things that you are for, and but if that's what you feel, yeah, I'm cool with it. I have no problem with people thinking how they believe. Hey, Mike, thank you very much for the phone call again. I enjoyed hearing your voice. I hope your health is good and that harp playing angel is doing really well.
Yeah,
okay?
she's doing really well. All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go.
Take care, Mike.
All right, the phone lines are open right now, 800-313-9443. And story coming on out of government slaves here. Apparently, Google employees are systematically listening to audio files recorded by Google Home smart speakers and the Google Assistant smartphone app. We may presume that these smart speakers and home assistants are listening in the dead of night when you and your significant other are engaging in carnal bliss. So these Google employees are getting some, free audio porn, as it would be here. All righty, Vladimir Putin yesterday said that 95% of the world's terrorist attacks are orchestrated by the Central Intelligence Agency. I don't have a problem with that. Don't have a problem with that at all. Bill Holter and Jim Sinclair are out there predicting a major crash for the U.S. dollar, saying it'll be sliced in half. They're predicting that gold could hit $87,000 an ounce. I don't think it could go that high. I'm in agreement that it could hit 2,000 by the end of the year, but 87,000 per ounce, I don't see the bankers allowing that to happen, because it would lure people out of their savings accounts. It would lure people out of their brokerage accounts. I don't think that's going to happen here. Okay, on the subject of license plate readers, apparently they are now going private, and apparently landlords are starting to use them to manage tenants and basically keep track of who is coming and going. And I understand the concerns about security and knowing who's going in and coming out. Just up the hill here, we have this rather large apartment complex, and one of Claire's singers lives there. And for the longest time, we'd pick her up, drop her off twice a week, once for rehearsal, once for performance. And every time we went in, they would pull us over and they'd write our license plate down and just give us the whole Nazi treatment. And so a license plate reader probably would make things a little bit easier. Here's a bizarre story, and again, it's coming out of government slaves here. The makers of voting machines are being asked to find out, who owns you. Now, with Diebold, we know who owned them, but there are all these other voting machine makers, and they're now claiming the names of the entities that own them are trade secrets. They don't want you to know who owns these companies that make these voting machines. That, to me, is just a red flag that something is going on here. Alrighty, let's see. Another report coming out of the police about Epstein's New York mansion. Apparently, he had a safe in that mansion. It's a seven-story tall mansion on the east side. And apparently he had this very large safe in there that was just filled with CD-ROMs of nude and semi-nude photos of underage girls. And they were all carefully notated. Guy's just... he's a sicko. Let's just say what it is. He's a sicko. Anyway, another story, this one coming on out from 12160.info, talking about the Robert Mueller investigation and underscoring the fact that they actually failed to provide any evidence that the DNC was actually hacked. This gets all the way back to this whole issue with Seth Rich. And was he in fact killed because he was the leaker to WikiLeaks? It came on out, the DNC and Hillary came out, oh, Russia hacked us. Russia hacked us. Seth Rich was a botched robbery because they shot him twice in the back and they left his phone, they left his watch, and they left his little gold chain around his neck, left his wallet. But it was a botched robbery. It was those evil Russians. They never proved the DNC was actually hacked. And the metadata on those files on WikiLeaks showed they couldn't have been copied over the internet because they were copied too fast. So the Seth Rich story is back in the news here. By the way, the cartoonist who drew one of the more interesting Seth Rich comics, Ben Garrison, has been invited to the White House for this upcoming media summit. So I hope something good is going to come out of that, and it's not just another public relations event about, yes, we understand there's a problem, and Facebook is being bad, and YouTube is being bad, and Google is being bad, and we're going to let Congress look at it, which means nothing would get done here. Prescription drug prices are now skyrocketing at 5 times the rate of inflation. Just a big, big moneymaker. And we had that story yesterday about the gabapentin, which is this medication which apparently can lead people to suicide. And it's hugely popular. And it turns out that the reason is that the manufacturer is financially incentivizing care providers to prescribe this medication. We've been seeing that with the opioids. We're seeing that with certain vaccines. They're being paid to stick you with that needle. Alrighty. Over at the National Center for Climate Change, they've issued a report without any scientific evidence saying that human-caused global warming will be the end of human civilization. So they're out there screaming, get rid of all humans to save the planet. Which is like that. Remember that horrible remake of Day the Earth Stood Still? The original was on Turner Classic Movies the other night. And it's a good movie if you haven't seen it. It's directed by Robert Wise, who I got to work with on Star Trek The Motion Picture. And it was a really good movie. And then they did a remake of it with Keanu Reeves. And they changed it around to humans are bad for the earth, therefore we're going to kill all the humans. I thought it kind of sucked. Okay. More from Ann Coulter. Jeffrey Epstein is the cover boy for a global state-sponsored blackmailing operation. A lot of stuff coming out of Southern California regarding the recent earthquakes. A lot of people are very concerned that more may be on the way. Well, it's only a matter of time. There are always going to be more earthquakes in Southern California. The key is to be prepared for them. And so we're seeing a lot of articles about making sure that you have your storable water, your storable food. The most important thing to have, though, there is a type of long duration storage battery. When you take it out of the package, you literally twist it to activate it. And you need to get some of those, because one of the things that has really been depressing me about this move is how much equipment I wound up throwing away because the batteries that were inside it leaked. And we're talking name brand batteries, not the cheapo, house brand batteries, but name brand. You see them all over TV advertisement. And they say on the back, guaranteed not to leak. They still leak. And they destroyed equipment. All right, we got a caller on the line. Dan in Illinois. Dan, I'm going to have to take you into the final segment of our show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I seen Jim Holter and Holter and Sinclair talking. I seen that video, and what they were talking about was you take the gold reserves, supposed gold reserves of the United States, and you take it to the debt, and excluding a few things like Social Security and things like that, and it comes out to where gold would have to be that price, 87,000 an ounce. They didn't say it was going there.
Okay.
It would have to be that.
All right, thank you for that clarification there. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And speaking of gold, rather interesting little story out there. There is this asteroid. And back in the 19th century, Italian astronomer Annibale Gasparis named it Psyche, after the figure from Greek mythology, this very beautiful woman. And it turned out, surprise, 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 that this asteroid contains a huge amount of gold, $10 quintillion worth at current prices. Now, obviously getting that from its orbit to Earth would be very, very difficult. But NASA is getting ready to send a probe to land on the asteroid and basically, dig around and take a look at it. But it's another reminder that out there in space, there are vast resources. Now, a lot of people are saying, if we could bring that asteroid down to Earth, it would make everybody a billionaire. No, it wouldn't. That much gold floating around, the price would fall to zero. It's the scarcity that makes it valuable. And again, like diamonds, I have to wonder how much of that scarcity is real and how much of it is manufactured, because today's gold mines are producing more gold every month than was being produced every year in the 16th century. And like diamonds in the jewelry stores, there's enough gold for to have in all the jewelry stores at the shopping mall for everybody to have a little bit, especially this little bit on the finger. Is gold really that rare, or is it another manufactured scarcity to drive prices up? It's kind of hard to know about that. And sometimes metals just start out worth a lot of money, and then things change. And a good example is aluminum. And for most of human history, pure aluminum was very rare. It had to be refined from bauxite, and it was considered more precious than gold. Aluminum bars were displayed next to the French crown jewels, and on the very top of the Washington Monument is a little tiny pyramid of pure aluminum, and it was very expensive. However, with the advent of modern refining techniques like the Hall-Héroult process, now it's considered a junk metal. We use it in our beer cans. We crumple it up, we just throw it away. So anyway, NASA's going to send this probe out to Psyche. That will be kind of an interesting little expedition. I'm certain that Scrooge McDuck is going to volunteer to be on that particular mission out there, along with King Midas. What can I tell you? So anyway, we're coming up here on the end of the program. And yeah, there's the music. All right, time for me to get on out of here. Get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please donate to RBN. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.